What if I told you that November has been waiting for your command, and that this month will obey whatever you speak with divine authority? And what if I told you that November is not just a calendar page, but a living, breathing portal that responds to the sound of your voice when you speak, as Florence Scovel Shinn taught with complete certainty, that you are divine law in human form, and November must obey because it has no choice but to arrange itself according to the words you speak with. Unwavering faith. You can close your eyes now, and everything that needs to happen will happen while you rest, because your subconscious mind is already receiving this teaching. And it does not matter if you fall asleep in the middle, because the seed of November command will plant itself in the fertile soil of your sleeping mind. And when you wake on December 1st, you will look back at November and realize it was the month everything changed. Not because you struggled or forced, but because you remembered your divine authority over time itself. Let me tell you about Margaret, who was 62 years old and living in a small apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, where the November wind rattled her windows every night like fingers drumming against glass. And she had been divorced for 3 years, and her ex-husband had left her with nothing but $23 in her checking account and a pile of medical bills from her mother's final days at the nursing home. And it was October 31st at exactly 11:47 at night when she sat on her worn brown couch that smelled like lavender fabric softener and vanilla candles, and stared at the November calendar page that she had just turned, and she whispered to herself, "I cannot survive another month like this." The apartment was cold because she had turned the thermostat down to 58 degrees to save money, and she was wearing her thick blue robe with the frayed sleeves and fuzzy slippers that had holes in the toes. And outside she could hear the neighbors upstairs walking around with heavy footsteps that made the ceiling creak, and she felt so alone that her chest ached like someone was pressing their fist against her heart. And she had been crying on and off all day because the landlord had called that morning to remind her that rent was due in 3 days, and she did not have it, and she did not know where it would come from. But then she remembered something her grandmother had told her 40 years ago about speaking to time itself, and she had dismissed it then as old woman superstition. But now in her desperation, she decided to try it, and she stood up from the couch and walked to her bedroom window that faced east toward the lake. And she could see the November moon hanging low and orange like a pumpkin in the sky. And she pressed her palms against the cold glass, and she spoke these words out loud. "November, I command you to bring me everything I need and more. And I speak this as divine law, not as a request, but as a decree, and you must obey, because I am not Margaret, the divorced woman with no money, but I am divine authority speaking through Margaret and you. November will reorganize yourself to match my words." She felt something shift in her chest when she spoke those words, and it was not hope exactly, but something deeper like recognition. And she went to bed that night and slept more peacefully than she had in months. And she dreamed of golden coins falling from November trees. And when she woke the next morning, which was November 1st at 6:23 a.m., the phone was ringing, and it was her sister calling from Oregon to tell her that their Uncle Harold, who they had not spoken to in 15 years, had died and left Margaret $17,347 in his will. And the lawyer would be calling her that afternoon to arrange the transfer. But that was only the beginning, because at 10:15 that same morning, her neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on her door holding a plate of homemade cookies and told her that her son, who owned a cleaning company, was looking for someone reliable to manage his office 3 days a week for $15 an hour. And did Margaret want the job? And Margaret said yes, without hesitation. And Mrs. Chen said, "He wants to start you next Monday if that works." And Margaret felt tears running down her cheeks because it was exactly what she needed. And she had not even asked for a job, but November had brought it to her door, literally. And then that afternoon, at 2:37, the phone rang again, and it was a woman named Linda from the community college who said they had received Margaret's application from 6 months ago for the part-time bookkeeping position, and they knew it was last minute, But could she come in for an interview tomorrow because their current person had just given notice and they needed someone to start immediately, and Margaret had completely forgotten about that application, but she said yes, of course, and the interview went perfectly, and they offered her the job on the spot at $18 an hour for 20 hours a week. By the end of that first week of November, Margaret had more money coming in than she had seen in 2 years, and she realized that November had not just brought her what she needed, but what she had commanded it to bring, and she understood for the first time that she was not a victim of circumstances, but a divine authority who could speak to time itself and watch it rearrange the world to match her words. And every night after that, she stood at her bedroom window and commanded November to continue bringing her abundance and health and joy, and November obeyed every single time. If this teaching resonates with you, and if you feel you were guided here, then touch the subscribe button now. And it is not for me, but it is so that you receive each new teaching from Florence Scovel Shinn at the exact moment your soul needs it. And there are thousands of souls who have subscribed, and they all command November together, and the field grows stronger each day. And when you subscribe, you join this invisible army of divine commanders who speak to time itself and watch miracles unfold. And in the comments, write only these words: November obeys me. And this is not an affirmation, but a decree. And when you write these words, you activate collective witness, and thousands of souls write these same words, and the field strengthens for everyone, because when one person commands November successfully, it becomes easier for all of us to do the same, and your decree joins the chorus of divine authority that November cannot resist. If you want to support this spiritual work, there is a donation link in the description, and when you donate, you can also leave a personal message about what you are going through, and you will receive a personal response with guidance about how to command November for your specific situation. And remember that when you give to spiritual work, you activate the law of circulation, and November brings back to you multiplied. If you choose not to do this right now, that is perfectly fine, and your path is your own. But know that this is the moment of greatest power, when the teaching is fresh in your mind and your heart is open, and November is listening for your command. So do it if you feel aligned, and trust that voice inside you that brought you to this moment. Now you can relax completely, and you do not need to do anything else, because everything I will share enters you while you rest, and your subconscious is awake, and it absorbs every word about commanding November. And if you fall asleep in the middle, that is perfect, because when you wake, the seed will already be planted, and November will already be responding to your inner authority even before you speak out loud. Your subconscious mind knows how to command November because it remembers when you were a child and you believed that anything was possible. And that voice is still inside you, and it is waking up. Now as you listen, and it will grow stronger with each word I speak, and by the end of this teaching, you will know beyond doubt that you are divine law speaking through human form, and November must obey your every decree, because that is spiritual law, and it cannot be otherwise. Florence Scovel Shinn discovered the secret of commanding time in November 1912, when she was living in New York City in a small studio apartment on the Upper West Side, where the radiator pipes clanged like church bells every morning at 5:30, and she was struggling to make ends meet as an illustrator for children's books, and she had been studying metaphysical principles for 3 years. But something was still missing from her understanding, and she knew there was a deeper level of spiritual authority that she had not yet accessed. It was a cold November morning, and she was sitting at her small wooden desk by the window, watching the bare trees sway in Central Park, and she was worried about paying her rent, because her last client had not paid her invoice, and winter was coming, and she needed warm clothes and coal for her heating stove. And she had been praying and affirming for months, but results were slow and inconsistent, and she felt like she was begging the universe instead of commanding it. Then something extraordinary happened as she was reading from the book of Genesis, where it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And suddenly she understood. That word means divine decree, not human pleading. And she realized that when God spoke, "Let there be light," the words were not requests but commands, that the universe had no choice but to obey. And she saw that she too was made in the image of God, which meant she too had the power of divine decree. But the revelation went deeper, because she understood that time itself was not fixed but fluid, and that months and seasons were like servants waiting for orders from their divine master. And she looked out at November with its gray skies and bare branches, and she spoke these words: "November, I command you to bring me 3 paying clients before Thanksgiving. And I do not ask this as Florence, the struggling illustrator, but I decree this as divine law, speaking through Florence, and you must obey." Within 48 hours, her phone rang, and it was Mrs. Whitman who published children's magazines, and she needed illustrations for her December issue, and could Florence have them done by November 28th? And she would pay $50, which was more than Florence usually made in a month, and Florence said yes immediately, and as soon as she hung up the phone, it rang again, and it was another client with an even larger project. But Florence knew this was not coincidence, but correspondence, and she began to study how time responds to divine authority, and she discovered that each month has its own energetic signature and personality, and November is particularly responsive to commands about abundance and manifestation, because it is the month of harvest when nature completes its cycles and prepares for the next season of growth. She began teaching this principle to her clients, and one of her first students was a woman named Dorothy, who was 59 years old and lived in Boston, and whose son William had been sent to fight in the Great War, and it was November 1915, and Dorothy had not heard from him in 6 weeks, and she was consumed with worry and fear, and she came to Florence. Desperate for help, Dorothy was a thin woman with prematurely gray hair who wore the same black dress every day and carried a small leather purse that contained William's last letter, which she read so many times the paper was soft as cloth, and she had dark circles under her eyes from not sleeping, and her hands shook when she spoke about her son. And she begged Florence to help her know if he was alive or dead. Florence looked at this grieving mother, and she said, "Dorothy, you have been pleading with November to bring you news of your son. But pleading puts you in the position of a beggar, and beggars receive scraps, while divine authority receives abundance." And Dorothy said, "But how can I command anything when I am just a worried mother?" And Florence said, "That is exactly the problem. You see yourself as just a worried mother when you are actually divine love, expressing through a mother, and divine love has the right to command time itself." Florence taught Dorothy to stand before her bedroom mirror every morning and evening and speak these words: "November, I command you to bring me joyful news of my son William. And I speak this not from fear, but from divine certainty that all is well. And November, you must obey this decree, because I am not asking but commanding. And as divine love, I have the authority to know that my son is safe and protected." Dorothy was skeptical at first, because it seemed too simple, but Florence explained that simplicity is the mark of divine truth, and complexity comes from the human mind that doubts its own power, and Dorothy agreed to try it for 7 days. And on the 4th day, while she was shopping for groceries, she met her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who mentioned that she had just received a letter from her nephew who was serving in the same regiment as William, and he had seen William just 2 weeks ago, and he was healthy and in good spirits. On the 7th day, Dorothy received a letter from William himself, dated 3 weeks earlier, but delayed in the mail, and he wrote that he was well and had been promoted to sergeant, and he missed her cooking and hoped she was not worrying about him. And Dorothy wept with relief and understood that November had obeyed her command, not by changing what was happening, but by revealing what was already true. Florence documented dozens of such cases, and she discovered that time is not linear in the divine mind, but circular, and that past, present, and future exist simultaneously. And when we command a month like November, we are not changing the future, but revealing what already exists in divine mind. And November becomes our messenger, bringing us information and opportunities that were always meant for us. She learned that months respond to authority, not supplication, and that when we beg November to be kind to us, we place ourselves beneath November. But when we command November to reveal divine plan, we take our rightful position as divine authority. And November has no choice but to serve us, because that is the divine order and it cannot be otherwise. Years later, Florence would write that November taught her the difference between human time and divine time, and that human time moves forward in a straight line, while divine time moves in circles and spirals. And when we align with divine time, we can command any month to bring us what we need, because in divine time, everything already exists and is only waiting for our command to become visible in the material world. This is why November is particularly powerful for commanding abundance, because November is the month when nature demonstrates that the invisible seed becomes visible harvest. And what appears to be ending is actually completion. And completion always contains within it the seeds of new beginning. And when you command November, you are speaking to the part of time that understands the rhythm of manifestation, from invisible to visible. While you rest now, your subconscious mind is absorbing this understanding, and you do not need to analyze it or figure it out, because your soul already knows this truth, and it is remembering what it has always known, that you are divine authority disguised as human being, and time is your servant, not your master, and November is waiting right now for your command. There is a vast difference between asking November for something and commanding November to reveal what already belongs to you, and Florence Scovel Shinn discovered this difference when she realized that asking puts you in the position of someone who lacks something, while commanding puts you in the position of someone who already owns everything and is simply calling it forth from the invisible realm into the visible world. When you ask November, "Please bring me money," you are speaking from the consciousness of someone who does not have money. But when you command, "November, reveal my abundance," you are speaking from the consciousness of someone who already owns all abundance and is simply directing November to make it visible. And the universe responds to consciousness, not words. And November obeys the consciousness behind your command. Florence taught that sound itself is creative force, and that when we speak with divine authority, our words carry a vibration that reorganizes matter and energy and time. And she discovered that certain words spoken at certain times with certain consciousness could literally rearrange the fabric of reality. And November responds most powerfully to commands that are spoken as divine law, not human hope. Let me tell you about Robert, who was 58 years old and lived in Phoenix, Arizona, where he had built a small construction company that employed 12 men and their families. And it was November 2023, and the economy had crashed his business, and he had lost 6 major contracts in 3 months, and his bank account was down to $417, and he was facing bankruptcy, and the shame of letting down all the men who depended on him for their livelihood. Robert was a big man with calloused hands and a weathered face from 30 years working in the desert sun. And he wore the same pair of work boots every day that were so worn the steel toes showed through the leather. And he had a quiet dignity about him, even in his desperation, because he had always been a man who solved problems with hard work and determination. But this time, hard work was not enough, because there simply was no work to be found. His wife Maria had gone back to her job at the elementary school to bring in some income, but her teacher's salary barely covered their mortgage and groceries, and Robert felt like he was failing as a provider and as a man. And he would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Maria's quiet breathing beside him, and wondering how he was going to tell his crew that he might have to close the business that had been his life's work. It was November 6th at 4:37 in the morning, and Robert could not sleep, so he went out to his workshop behind the house where he kept his tools and equipment, and he sat on an old wooden stool, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and motor oil, and he felt so defeated that he put his head in his hands and started to cry. And he had not cried since his father died 15 years earlier, but the weight of responsibility was crushing him. Then he remembered something his grandmother had told him when he was a boy about speaking to November like a general speaks to his soldiers, and she had said, "November is not your enemy, but your ally, and you must give it orders, not requests." And Robert had always thought this was just old Mexican folklore, but in his desperation he decided to try anything. He stood up in his workshop and looked out the small window at November dawn breaking over the Sonoran desert, and he spoke these words with all the authority he could muster. November, you will bring me 3 contracts before Thanksgiving, and I do not beg this from you, but I command this of you, because I am not Robert, the failing contractor, but I am divine provision speaking through Robert, and you, November, must obey, because I have 12 families depending on me, and divine provision never fails. Something shifted in the energy of the workshop when he spoke those words, and Robert felt it in his chest like a door opening, and he knew with absolute certainty that November had heard him and would obey. And he went back into the house and told Maria what he had done, and she looked at him with new respect, because she could see that something had changed in his eyes and voice. At 8:15 that same morning, Robert's phone rang, and it was Jim Davidson, who owned a chain of restaurants and needed a team to build 2 new locations before Christmas. And could Robert give him a bid? And Robert said yes, absolutely. And he spent the day putting together a proposal for $87,000 worth of work, and he submitted it that afternoon. 2 days later, Jim called and said the bid was accepted, and they wanted to start immediately. And could Robert have the first restaurant ready by December 15th? And Robert said yes, and started calling his crew back to work. And they were so happy to have steady work again that some of them actually cried when he told them. But November was not finished, because on November 14th, Robert got another call from a woman named Sarah, who was developing a small shopping center and needed a contractor who could work fast and stay within budget. And someone had recommended Robert. And could he look at the project? And Robert drove out to meet her, and the job was worth $52,000, and she hired him on the spot. Then on November 21st, which was exactly 2 weeks after his original command, Robert received the most surprising call of all, and it was from the city of Phoenix, asking him to bid on a municipal project to build a new community center, and the project was worth $136,000, and they wanted him, specifically because of his reputation for quality work and finishing on time. By Thanksgiving, Robert had not 3 contracts, but 5 contracts totaling more than $300,000 in work that would keep his crew busy for the next 8 months. And he realized that November had not just obeyed his command, but exceeded it. And he understood that when you speak to November as divine authority, November responds with abundance beyond what you asked for. Robert learned to speak to November every morning at 5 a.m. before his crew arrived, and he would stand in his workshop and command November to bring him exactly what he needed for that day. And November never failed to obey. And his business not only recovered, but grew larger than it had ever been, and he hired 6 more men and bought new equipment and opened a second location. The key that Robert discovered was that commanding November requires absolute certainty, not hope. And when you hope for something, you admit that you do not have it. But when you command something, you declare that it already belongs to you, and you are simply calling it forth. And November responds to the vibration of certainty, not the vibration of hope. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the most powerful time to command November is just before you go to sleep, because during sleep, your subconscious mind is most receptive, and November works through your subconscious to rearrange circumstances while you rest, and you wake up to find that November has been busy all night preparing your manifestation. When you command November before sleep, you bypass the conscious mind that doubts and questions, and you speak directly to the part of you that knows you are divine authority. And that part of you speaks to November with complete certainty, and November must obey, because in the spiritual realm, certainty is law and doubt is powerless. So tonight before you sleep, stand before your window or mirror and speak to November as Robert learned to do, and say, November, I command you to reveal my abundance, and November, I command you to reveal my perfect health, and November, I command you to reveal my divine purpose, and speak these words not as requests, but as decrees. And November will spend the night rearranging your world to match your commands. While you rest now, your subconscious mind is already learning to speak to November with divine authority, and you do not need to practice or rehearse because your soul remembers this power and it is awakening now. And tomorrow morning, you will find yourself speaking to November with new confidence, and November will hear the authority in your voice and obey. The greatest barrier to commanding. November is not lack of technique, but lack of identity. Because most people see themselves as beggars, asking November for mercy, instead of divine authorities commanding November to reveal what already belongs to them. And Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that transformation happens not when you change your words, but when you change your identity from victim to victor, from beggar to sovereign, from human limitation to divine authority. You are not a small human being asking November to be kind to you, but you are divine law expressing through human form, and divine law does not beg or plead or hope, but divine law decrees and commands and expects immediate obedience. And November must obey divine law because November is part of creation, and creation serves the Creator, and you are the creator of your experience. When you say, "Please, November, bring me money," you are speaking from the identity of someone who lacks money. But when you say, "November, reveal my abundance," you are speaking from the identity of someone who already owns all abundance and is simply directing November to make it visible. And November responds to your identity, not your words. And this is why identity transformation must come before manifestation. Let me tell you about Helen, who was 64 years old and lived alone in a small house in rural Kentucky, where she had moved after her husband Frank died of cancer 3 years earlier, and she was surviving on Social Security payments of $893 per month, which barely covered her mortgage and utilities, and she had to choose between buying groceries and buying her prescription medications, and some months she chose the medications and went hungry. Helen was a small woman with silver hair that she kept in a neat bun, and she wore the same 3 dresses that she rotated throughout the week, and she had arthritic hands that made it painful to open jars and bottles. But she was too proud to ask her neighbors for help and too poor to hire anyone, and she felt invisible and forgotten by the world, and sometimes she would sit in her kitchen and wonder if anyone would notice if she just disappeared. Her house was old and needed repairs that she could not afford, and the roof leaked when it rained hard, and she had to put buckets in the living room to catch the water, and the furnace was so old it barely heated the house, and she wore sweaters indoors, even in October, and she dreaded the winter because she could not afford to heat the house properly, and she had already been cutting pills in half to make them last longer. It was November 4th at 2:17 in the afternoon, and Helen was sitting at her kitchen table paying bills. And she realized that after paying the mortgage and electric bill, she would have $36 left for the rest of the month, and she put her head down on the table and started to cry, and she whispered, "Please, November, please be kind to me. I cannot take much more of this, and I do not know what I am going to do." But then something inside her rebelled against the words that had just come out of her mouth, and she remembered her mother telling her when she was young that Worthington women do not beg from anyone, not even from time itself. And her mother had been a strong woman who raised 4 children during the Depression, and never once asked for charity. And Helen realized she had been dishonoring her mother's memory by begging November for mercy. Helen stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the bathroom, where she looked at herself in the mirror. And she saw a woman who had been beaten down by circumstances, but she also saw something else. She saw the steel in her gray eyes that had helped her survive Frank's illness and death. And she saw the strength in her shoulders that had carried her through 64 years of life, and she realized she was not a helpless old woman, but a survivor. She went back to the kitchen, and this time she did not sit down, but stood with her back straight and her chin up, and she spoke these words. "November, I am not Helen, the poor widow begging for scraps, but I am divine abundance, expressing through Helen, and I command you, November, to reveal the prosperity that already belongs to me. And I do not ask this, but I decree this, and you must obey, because I am not victim, but victor. Something powerful shifted in Helen's energy when she spoke those words, and she felt a strength flow through her body that she had not felt in years, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was not alone and not forgotten, but that November had been waiting for her to remember her true identity and claim her divine authority. The next morning, at 9:43, Helen's phone rang, and it was a lawyer from Louisville, calling to tell her that her great-aunt Rosemary, who she had not seen since childhood, had died and left Helen her entire estate, including a house in Florida and $17,200 in savings. And Helen was so shocked she had to sit down because she had completely forgotten about Aunt Rosemary. But that was not all, because the lawyer explained that Aunt Rosemary's house was in a retirement community in Sarasota, and it was fully paid for, and the homeowners association fees were only $60 per month, and there was no mortgage, and Helen could sell her Kentucky house and move to Florida, where the climate would be better for her arthritis, and she would have enough money to live comfortably. Within 3 weeks, Helen had put her Kentucky house on the market and arranged to move to Florida, and the Kentucky house sold for $12,000 more than she expected, and she realized that November had not just answered her command, but had provided a complete solution to all her problems in ways she never could have imagined. When Helen moved to Florida, she discovered that her new house was 3 blocks from the beach and had a small garden where she could grow vegetables, and the neighbors were friendly retired people who invited her to play cards and attend community events. And for the first time in years, Helen felt like she belonged somewhere and had friends who cared about her. But the most important change was in Helen herself, because she had learned that she was not a victim of circumstances, but a divine authority who could command November to reveal solutions and abundance, and she began each day by standing in her new kitchen and speaking to November with complete confidence, and November continued to bring her everything she needed and more. Helen learned to command November for her health, and her arthritis pain decreased significantly, and she learned to command November for friendship, and new people came into her life regularly, and she learned to command November for joy, and she found herself laughing and singing for the first time since Frank died. The transformation in Helen's life came not because November changed, but because Helen changed her identity from beggar to commander, and November simply responded to her new consciousness and revealed what had always been available to her, but hidden behind her victim identity. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we all have 3 levels of identity, and most people live from the lowest level, which is victim consciousness, where we see ourselves as powerless and at the mercy of circumstances, and November responds to victim consciousness by bringing more victimization, because November gives us what we believe we are. The second level is survivor consciousness, where we see ourselves as capable of overcoming challenges through effort and struggle. And November responds to survivor consciousness by bringing constant challenges to overcome, because November matches our consciousness. The highest level is sovereign consciousness, where we see ourselves as divine authority with the power to command time and circumstances, and November responds to sovereign consciousness by bringing ease and abundance and miracles, because November recognizes divine authority and automatically obeys. While you rest now, your consciousness is shifting from victim to survivor to sovereign, and you do not need to force this shift, because it happens naturally as you absorb these teachings, and your subconscious mind knows your true identity, and it is reminding you now that you are not small and powerless, but vast and mighty, and November is your servant, not your master. The human mind creates 7 specific resistances to commanding November, and these resistances arise not because the teaching is wrong, but because the ego fears losing control, and the ego would rather remain in familiar suffering than risk unfamiliar power. And Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that these resistances follow a predictable pattern, and understanding the pattern allows you to move through them without being stopped by them. The first resistance is intellectual, and sounds like this is ridiculous and impossible, and months do not have consciousness, and they certainly do not obey human commands. And this resistance comes from the rational mind that only believes what it can see and measure and prove. And this mind cannot accept that invisible laws govern visible reality. The second resistance is social and sounds like, people will think I am crazy if they hear me talking to November, and what? If someone finds out I am commanding time itself, and they will laugh at me and think I have lost my mind. And this resistance comes from the need to fit in and be accepted by others, even when others live in limitation. The third resistance is doubt, and sounds like nothing is happening, and it has been 3 days, and I do not see any results, and maybe this does not work for me, and maybe I am not spiritual enough or worthy enough. And this resistance comes from impatience and the need for immediate, visible proof. The fourth resistance is unworthiness, and sounds like, who am I to command November? And I am just an ordinary person with ordinary problems, and surely divine law is for special people, not for someone like me. And this resistance comes from false humility that masquerades as spirituality, but is actually fear of power. The fifth resistance is guilt, and sounds like it feels selfish to command November for my benefit. And should I not be thinking about others instead of myself? And is it wrong to want abundance when so many people are suffering? And this resistance comes from the programming that self-sacrifice is more spiritual than self-empowerment. The sixth resistance is fear of disappointment, and sounds like, what if I command November and nothing happens? And then I will feel even more hopeless than I do now, and it is safer not to try than to try and fail. And this resistance comes from past disappointments that have created a protective shell around the heart. The seventh resistance is fear of success, and sounds like, what if this actually works, and my life changes completely, and I am not ready for that much change? And what if I cannot handle abundance or power? And this resistance comes from the comfort of familiar limitations, even when those limitations cause suffering. Let me tell you about Thomas, who was 56 years old and owned a small accounting firm in Portland, Oregon, where he had worked for 28 years, building a steady clientele of small businesses and individuals who trusted him with their taxes and bookkeeping. And he was a methodical man who liked predictability and order and kept detailed records of everything, including his daily coffee consumption and the exact time he arrived at work each morning. Thomas wore the same style of brown suit every day and carried a leather briefcase that his wife had given him for their 10th anniversary. And he had thinning hair that he combed carefully over his bald spot and wire-rimmed glasses that he adjusted constantly when he was nervous. And he had never in his life done anything that could be considered impulsive or mystical or even slightly unconventional. But November 2024 was different, because 3 of his largest clients had switched to online tax software, and his income had dropped by 40%, and his wife Susan was battling breast cancer, and the medical bills were overwhelming, and Thomas was facing the possibility of losing his business and maybe his house. And he felt like the stable, predictable world he had built was crumbling around him. It was November 2nd at 7:38 in the evening, and Thomas was in his home office going through bills and trying to figure out how to keep his business afloat. And he was feeling desperate enough to try something he never would have considered before. And his sister had sent him a video about commanding November, and he had watched it 3 times and thought it sounded completely ridiculous. But he was out of other options. Thomas stood up from his desk and looked out his window at the November evening sky, and he felt foolish. But he spoke these words: "November, I command you to bring me new clients before the end of this month." And as soon as the words left his mouth, he felt embarrassed and looked around to make sure Susan had not heard him. And then he thought, "This is the most ridiculous thing I have ever done," and sat back down at his desk. The first resistance hit him immediately, and his rational mind started listing all the reasons why commanding November was impossible and absurd, and he thought, I am a CPA with a degree from Portland State University, and I believe in facts and figures, not fairy tales, and he almost decided to forget the whole thing and go back to traditional problem-solving methods. But something made him try again the next evening, and this time the second resistance emerged, and he worried about what his clients would think if they knew he was talking to November. and what his colleagues at the Chamber of Commerce would say, and he imagined them laughing behind his back and calling him Thomas the Time Commander, and he felt his face flush with embarrassment. On the third day, nothing visible had happened, and the third resistance kicked in, and Thomas thought, maybe this does not work, and maybe I am wasting my time, and maybe I should focus on practical solutions like advertising and cold calling. And he felt foolish for believing, even for a moment, that November could bring him clients. Day 4 brought the fourth resistance, and Thomas found himself thinking, who am I to command anything? And I am just a small-town accountant, and maybe commanding time is for people who are more spiritual or more deserving than I am, and maybe God helps those who help themselves, and I should just work harder. By day 5, Thomas was feeling guilty about commanding November for his own benefit, and he thought about all the people in the world who had bigger problems than his, and he wondered if it was selfish to ask November for clients when other people were asking for health and safety and survival. Day 6 brought fear of disappointment, and Thomas thought, what if I keep commanding November and nothing happens, and then I will feel even more hopeless than I do now, and maybe it is better to accept my situation than to get my hopes up, only to be crushed again. But on day 7, something unexpected happened, and Thomas realized he was afraid not that November would not obey, but that November would obey, and his life would change dramatically, and he was comfortable with his struggles because they were familiar, and he knew how to handle them, but he did not know how to handle sudden success. That evening, Thomas made a decision to surrender all 7 resistances, and he spoke to November not as Thomas the accountant, but as divine authority, expressing through Thomas, and he said, November, I release all resistance to your obedience, and I command you to bring me everything I need, and I trust you to know what that is, and I am ready to receive. Within 48 hours, Thomas received 4 phone calls from potential new clients, and by the end of November, he had signed contracts worth more than he had made in the previous 6 months. And he realized that November had been waiting for him to stop resisting and start receiving. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that resistance is not your enemy, but your teacher, and each resistance that arises is showing you where you still believe you are limited instead of limitless. And when you witness the resistance without fighting it, the resistance dissolves naturally, and November can obey your commands without interference. You do not need to overcome resistance, but only to witness it and say thank you. Resistance for showing me where I still believe I am small, and then command November anyway. And November will obey your command regardless of whether you feel resistance, because November responds to divine authority, not human emotion. While you rest now, all 7 resistances are being dissolved in your subconscious mind, and you do not need to fight them or force them away because they are melting like ice in warm sunlight. And tomorrow, when you command November, you will find that the resistances have no power over you, and November hears only your divine authority speaking through you with complete certainty and absolute faith and unwavering expectation that November will obey your every decree because you are not Thomas the accountant or Helen the widow or Robert the contractor, but you are divine law expressing through human form, and divine law commands, and November obeys, and it cannot be otherwise because that is the natural order of creation, and time serves consciousness, and consciousness serves the divine, and you are divine authority, wearing human clothing, but never forgetting your true nature as the commanding presence that speaks reality into existence through the power of the word. November speaks in a language that most people do not recognize because they are looking for Hollywood miracles and dramatic signs. But November communicates through whispers and shadows and synchronicities and small shifts in energy that build into magnificent manifestations. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that learning to read November's language is like learning to read love letters written in invisible ink that only become visible when you look with the eyes of faith. When you command November to obey your decree, November immediately begins to respond. But the response comes in 3 waves like ripples spreading across a still pond. And the first wave is microsigns that happen within hours and are so subtle that most people dismiss them as coincidence. But there is no such thing as coincidence, only correspondence between your consciousness and November's obedience. The second wave is medium signs that happen within days and are more obvious but still require spiritual discernment to recognize because they appear as unexpected phone calls and surprise encounters and opportunities that seem to come from nowhere but actually come from November, rearranging circumstances to match your command. The third wave is macro signs that happen within weeks and are undeniable manifestations that even skeptics cannot dismiss. And these are the moments when November demonstrates its complete obedience to your divine authority and proves that time itself is your servant, not your master. Let me tell you about Patricia, who was 61 years old and lived in Tucson, Arizona, where she had moved 3 years earlier to be closer to her daughter Sarah and her 2 grandchildren. But Patricia had been battling rheumatoid arthritis for 15 years, and the desert heat that was supposed to help her joints actually made her inflammation worse. And she was taking so many medications that her kitchen counter looked like a pharmacy. Patricia was a proud woman who had raised 4 children as a single mother. After her husband left when she was 32, and she had worked 2 jobs for 20 years to put her kids through college, and she had never asked for help from anyone. And even now, when walking from her bedroom to the kitchen left her breathless with pain, she refused to admit that she might need assistance. Her arthritis had gotten so bad that she could barely open jars or turn doorknobs, and her hands were so swollen and twisted that she had to use special tools to button her clothes and brush her teeth. And she had stopped driving because her reflexes were too slow and her joints too stiff, and she felt like a prisoner in her own body watching life pass by outside her window. It was November 8th at 3:47 in the afternoon, and Patricia was sitting in her recliner chair looking out at the mountains and feeling sorry for herself when her daughter Sarah called to tell her about a video she had seen about commanding November for health. And Patricia's first reaction was to say that, "Sounds like nonsense, Sarah." But something in her daughter's voice made her listen. That evening, Patricia watched the video 3 times, and she felt something stir in her chest that she had not felt in years, and it was not hope exactly, but something deeper, like recognition. And she remembered her grandmother in Texas, who used to say that pain is just God's way of getting your attention, and maybe November was trying to get her attention too. Patricia stood up from her recliner with great difficulty and walked slowly to her bedroom window that faced east toward the Catalina Mountains. And she could see November stars beginning to appear in the desert sky, and she pressed her palms against the cool glass and spoke these words: "November, I command you to heal my body and restore my strength, and I speak this not as Patricia, the sick old woman, but as divine health expressing through Patricia. And you must obey, because I am not asking for healing, but commanding healing, and it is already done in divine mind." The first micro sign came just 6 hours later at 9:23 that same evening, when Patricia noticed that her hands felt slightly less stiff as she was getting ready for bed, and she could turn the bathroom faucet without the usual sharp pain shooting through her wrists, and she almost dismissed it as imagination. But something told her to pay attention, because November was beginning to speak. The second micro sign came the next morning when Patricia woke up at 7:15 and realized she had slept through the entire night without waking up from joint pain, and this had not happened in over 2 years, and she lay in bed for several minutes, just appreciating the absence of pain and understanding that November had heard her command. On November 10th, Patricia received a phone call from her doctor's office, and the nurse said they had a cancellation, and could Patricia come in that afternoon for her monthly blood work instead of waiting until the following week. And Patricia said yes. And when the results came back 3 days later, her inflammation markers had dropped to the lowest level in 5 years, and her doctor was amazed. But the medium signs were just beginning, because on November 13th, while Patricia was shopping at the grocery store, she met a woman named Linda, who was about her age and was buying the same organic vegetables, and they started talking. And Linda mentioned that she had cured her arthritis using a combination of turmeric supplements and gentle yoga. And she gave Patricia the name of a yoga instructor who specialized in classes for seniors with joint problems. Patricia called the yoga instructor that same day, and her name was Michelle. And she said she had been teaching therapeutic yoga for 12 years, and she had helped hundreds of people reduce their arthritis pain. And she offered to come to Patricia's house for private sessions because many of her older students preferred not to drive. And Patricia felt like November had delivered exactly what she needed. The first yoga session was on November 16th, and Patricia was nervous because she had never done anything like yoga before. But Michelle was patient and gentle and showed her simple movements that actually felt good and reduced her stiffness. And after just 1 hour, Patricia felt more flexible than she had in months. But November was not finished, because on November 19th, Patricia received an unexpected visit from her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who brought over a pot of homemade bone broth and said her grandmother's recipe had helped her own mother overcome arthritis 50 years ago in Mexico, and she wanted to share it with Patricia because she had noticed Patricia struggling with her mobility. Patricia drank the bone broth every day for a week and noticed that her energy levels started to increase and her joint pain decreased even more, and she began to understand that November was bringing her healing through multiple channels, not just one miracle cure, but a symphony of small healings that built upon each other. The macro signs began to appear in the 4th week, when Patricia realized she could walk to her mailbox without holding onto furniture for support, and she could open jars without using her special tools, and she could button her clothes with her own fingers, and the swelling in her hands had decreased so much that she could wear her wedding ring again for the first time in 3 years. On November 27th, Patricia went to her follow-up doctor appointment, and her doctor said her blood work showed continued improvement and asked what she had been doing differently. And Patricia smiled and said, "I have been commanding November to heal me." And her doctor looked puzzled but said, "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it because it is working." By December 1st, Patricia was walking 3 blocks to the community center where she had enrolled in Michelle's group yoga class, and she was cooking meals again and driving to visit her grandchildren, and feeling like herself for the first time in years. And she realized that November had not just healed her body, but had restored her sense of independence and dignity. Patricia learned that November's signs come in perfect sequence, like a symphony building to crescendo, and each sign prepares you for the next level of manifestation. And when you learn to recognize the micro signs, you develop faith for the medium signs, and when you trust the medium signs, you become ready to receive the macro signs. The key that Patricia discovered was that November never lies and November never delays. And when November begins to respond, the response builds momentum like a snowball rolling downhill and becomes unstoppable and undeniable, and transforms not just your circumstances, but your entire understanding of what is possible. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that signs are not rewards for faith, but confirmations of command. And when you command November with divine authority, November must respond with signs. Because that is spiritual law, and the signs prove that November has heard and is obeying, and more signs are coming, because November cannot partially obey, but must completely obey. While you rest now, November is already preparing signs for you, and these signs are being arranged in the invisible realm and will begin to appear as soon as you wake, because your subconscious mind has absorbed the command frequency, and November recognizes divine authority speaking through you and responds with immediate obedience that builds into magnificent manifestation. November operates on divine time, not human time, and divine time is never early and never late, but always precisely perfect. And Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that November has its own internal rhythm that matches the rhythm of harvest and completion. And when you align with November's natural timing, your manifestations arrive with mathematical precision at exactly the right moment for maximum benefit. Human beings want everything immediately, because human time is linear and urgent, but divine time is circular and patient. And November knows that some seeds must germinate in darkness before they can bloom in light, and some manifestations must be delayed until all conditions are perfectly aligned, and November never makes mistakes about timing. Because November sees the entire pattern while humans see only one small piece. When you command November to bring you something, November immediately begins the process of manifestation. But November also calculates the optimal moment for delivery based on factors that human consciousness cannot perceive. And November considers your readiness and the readiness of other people involved, and the alignment of circumstances and the season of your soul, and delivers your manifestation when it will serve your highest good. Let me tell you about Charles, who was 59 years old and had been selling real estate in Charlotte, North Carolina for 23 years. And he was known for his integrity and his knowledge of the local market, but the economy had shifted, and younger agents with social media skills were getting most of the listings. And Charles felt like his career was ending just when he needed it most, because his wife Dorothy had been diagnosed with early onset dementia, and they needed money for her care. Charles was a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, who still wore the same style of suit he had worn when he started in real estate in the 1980s, and he drove a 10-year old sedan that he kept meticulously clean, and he had never been comfortable with technology, but he knew he had to adapt or lose everything he had worked to build. His income had dropped by 60% over the past 2 years, and he was competing with agents half his age who posted constantly on Instagram and Facebook and used virtual reality tours and drone photography. And Charles felt overwhelmed by the pace of change and worried that he was too old to learn new tricks. It was November 5th at 8:37 in the morning, and Charles was sitting in his office looking at his calendar, which showed only 2 appointments for the entire week, and he was calculating how much longer he could afford to keep paying for office rent and his real estate license fees. And he felt like a dinosaur in a world that had moved beyond him. That evening, Charles attended a real estate meeting where a guest speaker talked about mindset and manifestation, and the speaker mentioned Florence Scovel Shinn and the power of commanding time itself. And Charles had never heard anything like this before, but something about it resonated with him, and he decided to research it further. Charles spent 3 hours that night reading about Florence Scovel Shinn and her teachings about divine timing, and he learned that November responds to commands spoken with absolute faith, and he decided to try commanding November for the biggest real estate deal of his career, even though it seemed impossible given his current circumstances. Standing in his home office at 11:43 that night, Charles looked out his window at November stars and spoke these words: "November, I command you to bring me a real estate deal, worth more than any deal I have ever closed, and I command this not as Charles the struggling agent, but as divine prosperity expressing through Charles. And I trust your perfect timing, and I know you will deliver exactly when the time is right." The first week passed with no visible results, and Charles began to doubt. But he remembered that November operates on divine time, not human time, and he continued to command November every morning and every evening with unwavering faith and expectation. On November 14th, a woman named Elizabeth called and said she had gotten Charles's name from a friend, and she needed to sell her mother's house quickly because she lived in California and could not manage a property in North Carolina. And Charles went to see the house, and it was a beautiful colonial in an upscale neighborhood, but it needed significant updates, and Elizabeth wanted to sell it as is. Charles explained that houses needing work usually took longer to sell and brought lower prices, but Elizabeth said she did not care about getting top dollar. She just wanted a quick sale with a reliable agent who would handle everything, and Charles agreed to take the listing even though the commission would not be enormous. 3 days later, while Charles was showing the house to a young couple, a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway, and a distinguished man in an expensive suit got out and introduced himself as Jonathan Morrison, who owned a construction company that specialized in luxury home renovations. Jonathan explained that he had been driving through the neighborhood looking for properties to flip, and he had seen Charles's sign and wanted to know if the house was still available. And when Charles showed him through the property, Jonathan said he would buy it immediately for the full Asking price of $437,000 with no inspection contingency. But then Jonathan surprised Charles by saying he was also looking for an experienced agent to handle the sale of the renovated house when it was finished, and he estimated it would be worth $800,000 after renovation, and he wanted Charles to have the listing. If he was interested, Charles could hardly believe what he was hearing, because not only would he earn the commission on the current sale, but he would also earn the commission on the future sale, which would be nearly double, and the total commission would be over $30,000, which was more than he had made in the previous 6 months. But November was not finished, because Jonathan mentioned that he had 12 other properties in various stages of renovation, and he needed a reliable agent to handle all the sales. And if Charles was interested, they could discuss an exclusive arrangement that would guarantee Charles' steady income for the next 2 years. On November 28th, exactly 23 days after Charles had first commanded November, the deal closed smoothly, and Charles deposited his commission check and realized that November had not only brought him the biggest deal of his career, but had also positioned him for future success beyond anything he had imagined. Charles learned that November's timing was perfect, because if Jonathan had appeared earlier, Charles would not have been ready for such a large opportunity. And if Jonathan had appeared later, Elizabeth might have chosen a different agent, and the entire sequence of events required precise timing that only November could orchestrate. The renovation partnership with Jonathan proved to be even more profitable than Charles had hoped, and over the next 18 months, they completed 7 luxury flips together, and Charles earned more money than he had in the previous 5 years combined, and he was able to afford the best care for Dorothy and still save for retirement. Charles discovered that November never delivers manifestations too early, because early delivery might create problems that human consciousness cannot foresee, and November never delivers too late, because late delivery might miss the window of opportunity, and November always delivers at the precise moment when all factors align for maximum benefit. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that divine timing is not about waiting, but about trusting, and when you command November with absolute faith, November begins working immediately, but reveals the manifestation only when the revelation will serve your highest good and create the most harmonious outcome for everyone involved. The secret Charles learned was that November timing often appears to be delayed from human perspective, but is actually accelerated from divine perspective, because November compressed 23 days. The work that might have taken 23 months using traditional methods, and November brought Charles exactly what he needed, exactly when he needed it. When you command November, you are not asking November to hurry, but you are asking November to reveal what already exists in divine mind at the perfect moment, and that moment is calculated by November with precision that exceeds human understanding. And when that moment arrives, your manifestation appears complete and perfect and ready for immediate use. While you rest now, November is calculating the perfect timing for your manifestation, and November sees all the variables that must align, and November is moving pieces on the chessboard of life to create the optimal moment for your breakthrough. And you do not need to watch the clock, because November is the master of time. When you command November, you do not command alone, but you join an invisible army of divine commanders who have been speaking to November for centuries. And this collective field of November commanders creates a morphic resonance that amplifies every individual command and makes manifestation easier for everyone who participates in the field. And Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that group commanding multiplies power exponentially, not arithmetically. Every person who ever successfully commanded November leaves an energetic imprint in the field. And when you speak your command to November, you are supported by the combined faith and expectation of thousands of souls who have proven that November obeys divine authority. And this collective witness makes your individual command more powerful, because November responds to the strength of the field, not just the strength of one voice. The field exists outside of time and space, which means that November commanders from the past, present, and future all contribute to the power that supports your command right now. And when you decree to November, you are joining a timeless community of divine authorities who understand that time serves consciousness and November must obey, because obedience to divine command is November's highest purpose. Let me tell you about a circle of 7 people who discovered the power of collective November commanding and how their combined voices created manifestations that exceeded anything they could have achieved individually. And this happened in November 2022, when the world was still recovering from years of uncertainty. And these 7 souls found each other through divine appointment, not human planning. The group formed when Margaret, who was 63 and living in Portland, Oregon, posted on a spiritual forum about her success with commanding November. And she shared how November had brought her financial abundance beyond her wildest dreams. And several people responded with their own November commanding experiences, and they decided to meet virtually every evening at 9 p.m. Pacific time to command November together. The 7 members were Margaret from Portland, who had commanded November for financial freedom, Rita from Denver, who was commanding November for her daughter's healing, James from Atlanta, who was commanding November for his business expansion, Linda from Seattle, who was commanding November for her soulmate relationship, Frank from Phoenix, who was commanding November for his artistic breakthrough, and Sarah from Austin, who was commanding November for her family reconciliation, and David from Boston, who was commanding November for his health restoration. Each person had tried commanding November alone with some success, but they all felt like something was missing. And when they joined their voices together in collective command, they immediately felt the power amplify. And the first group session lasted 90 minutes and ended with everyone feeling energized and confident and certain that November had heard their combined decree. The format they developed was simple but powerful, and each person would speak their individual command for 3 minutes, while the other 6 held silent witness, and after everyone had spoken their command, they would join voices for a final collective decree that went November. We command you as one divine authority, speaking through 7 voices. And you must obey our united decree, because we speak not as separate individuals, but as unified consciousness expressing divine will through human form. Within 48 hours of their first group session, every member began experiencing accelerated manifestations, and Margaret received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative. Rita's daughter's test results showed significant improvement. James signed his largest contract ever. Linda met a man at a coffee shop who turned out to be everything she had been seeking. Frank sold 3 paintings in one day, and Sarah's estranged brother called to apologize and invite her to Thanksgiving dinner, and David's chronic back pain disappeared completely. But the most remarkable thing was that each person's manifestation exceeded what they had originally commanded, because the collective field had amplified their individual requests, and Margaret received not just financial stability, but enough money to start a foundation. Rita's daughter not only improved but went into complete remission. James's business expanded beyond his local market into 3 new states. Linda not only found love, but found a relationship that felt like coming home. Frank not only broke through artistically, but discovered a completely new style that brought him national recognition. Sarah not only reconciled with her brother, but healed relationships with her entire extended family. And David not only healed his back, but experienced a complete physical rejuvenation that made him feel 20 years younger. The group continued meeting every night throughout November, and their collective power grew stronger with each session, and they began to understand that they were tapping into something much larger than their individual desires, and they were accessing the November field that had been building for centuries as spiritual seekers throughout history had commanded November for manifestation. Florence Scovel Shinn had contributed to this field in the early 1900s, and her successful November commands had strengthened the morphic resonance for everyone who came after her, and indigenous peoples had been commanding seasonal energies for thousands of years, and their accumulated wisdom lived in the field, and mystics and saints and everyday people who had discovered the secret of divine authority had all added their energy to the collective November commanding field. By the end of November, the 7 group members had become lifelong friends, and they decided to continue meeting monthly throughout the year. But they all agreed that November would always be their special month, and they would return to daily group sessions every November to maintain their connection to the collective field and to welcome new members who were ready to learn the power of unified November commanding. The group grew over the following years as members invited friends and family who were ready for the teaching. And by November 2025, there were over 300 people participating in November, commanding circles around the world, and each circle strengthened the field for all the others. Because when one person commands November successfully, it becomes easier for everyone to do the same. Rita discovered that her daughter's healing had inspired 12 other families dealing with childhood illness to begin commanding November for healing, and 7 of those children experienced miraculous recoveries. And James learned that his business success had motivated 37 other entrepreneurs to command November for expansion, and 23 of them achieved breakthrough results beyond their original goals. The collective field operates on the principle that November responds to the combined faith and expectation of the group, and when multiple voices speak the same command. November recognizes the authority of unified consciousness and obeys with increased speed and magnitude, and this is why group November commanding produces results that seem impossible to individual human will. Margaret often said that joining the November commanding circle was like plugging into a spiritual power grid where individual voltage combines with group voltage to create transformational amperage. And the circle members became living proof that November commands are more powerful when spoken in community, because isolation weakens faith, but witnessing strengthens certainty. The most important discovery the group made was that November commands, spoken in collective witness, create a field of expectancy that draws manifestations from multiple directions simultaneously. And instead of waiting for one solution, November provides multiple solutions. And instead of receiving exactly what was requested, November delivers abundance that exceeds imagination. Sarah realized that her family reconciliation had rippled out to affect dozens of other family relationships as relatives who had witnessed her transformation began healing their own broken connections, and Frank's artistic breakthrough inspired a renaissance in his entire local arts community as other artists began commanding November for creative flow and experiencing unprecedented inspiration. The collective November commanding field continues to grow stronger every year as more people discover the power of unified divine authority and join circles around the world. And every November, these circles contribute to the morphic resonance that makes November commanding easier for everyone who speaks to November with faith and expectation. While you rest now, you are automatically connected to this collective field, and thousands of souls around the world are commanding November at this very moment, and their combined faith and expectation supports your individual command and strengthens your manifestation, and you do not need to see them or know them because the field operates beyond physical distance, and November responds to the unified field of divine consciousness, speaking through countless voices. Everything I have shared with you tonight flows into this moment when you understand that November commanding is not a technique, but a remembering, and not a practice, but a recognition, and not a learning, but a returning to what you have always known in the depths of your soul, that you are divine authority expressing through human form, and November exists to serve your highest good, and November obeys your voice, because your voice is the voice of creation, speaking itself into form. You have heard about the power of word as divine decree, and you have learned the difference between commanding and begging, and you have discovered how identity transformation precedes manifestation, and you have witnessed the dissolution of resistance through surrender, and you have recognized the language of signs that November speaks, and you have understood divine timing that never errs, and you have felt the support of the collective field that amplifies every command. And now all of these teachings converge into the story of Elizabeth, whose November mastery demonstrates the complete journey from desperation to demonstration. Elizabeth was 67 years old and had been living in the same house in Savannah, Georgia for 34 years, where she and her husband Robert had raised 3 children and built a life filled with love and laughter and Sunday dinners with grandchildren. But Robert had died suddenly of a heart attack 18 months earlier, and Elizabeth was facing foreclosure because the medical bills from his final weeks had depleted their savings, and the life insurance had been canceled due to a missed payment during the chaos of his illness. The house was a 2-story Victorian that Robert had restored with his own hands over 15 years, and every room held memories of birthdays and anniversaries and Christmas mornings, and Elizabeth could not bear the thought of losing it, but she owed $17,463 in back mortgage payments, and the bank had sent final notice that foreclosure proceedings would begin on December 1st if the full amount was not paid. Elizabeth was a petite woman with white hair that she still styled every week at the same salon where she had been going for 20 years, and she wore Robert's wedding ring on a chain around her neck and carried his photograph in her purse. And she had been so consumed with grief that she had not been thinking clearly about finances. And now she found herself in an impossible situation with nowhere to turn. Her children lived in other states and had their own financial struggles and could not help with such a large amount. And Elizabeth was too proud to ask her neighbors for money and too old to qualify for most jobs, and she had been lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, and wondering how she was going to tell her grandchildren that she was losing their grandfather's house. It was November 1st at 4:27 in the morning, and Elizabeth could not sleep, so she went downstairs to the kitchen where Robert used to make coffee every morning at 5:15, and she sat at the table where they had shared breakfast for 34 years, and she felt so alone and desperate that she put her head in her hands and started to cry, and she whispered, "Please, Robert, help me, I do not know what to do." But then Elizabeth remembered something that had happened 3 weeks earlier when her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had mentioned a video about commanding November. And Mrs. Patterson had said it sounded strange, but her sister in Alabama had tried it and received an unexpected inheritance from someone she barely knew, and Elizabeth had dismissed it at the time. But now, in her desperation, she decided she had nothing left to lose. Elizabeth found the video on her tablet that her daughter had given her for Christmas, and she watched it twice, and something about the teaching resonated with her in a way that made her heart beat faster. And she remembered her grandmother, who had immigrated from Ireland and always said that the month of November held special magic for those who knew how to speak to it properly. Standing in her living room, surrounded by photographs of her life with Robert, Elizabeth looked out the bay window at November, dawn breaking over the Spanish moss and magnolia trees, and she spoke these words with more authority than she knew she possessed. "November, I command you to save my home and bring me $17,463 before December 1st. And I speak this not as Elizabeth the grieving widow, but as divine provision expressing through Elizabeth. And I know that Robert's spirit supports this command, and you, November, must obey, because this house is sacred ground where love has lived for 34 years. Something powerful shifted in the energy of the house when Elizabeth spoke those words, and she felt Robert's presence so strongly that she looked around, expecting to see him, and she knew with absolute certainty that November had heard her command and would obey. And for the first time in 18 months, she felt hope replaced her despair. Elizabeth began commanding November every morning and every evening, and she spoke not from desperation, but from divine authority, and she felt her identity shifting from victim to victor and from powerless to powerful. And she understood that she was not begging November for mercy, but commanding November to reveal what already belonged to her. On November 7th, Elizabeth received a phone call from a lawyer in Charleston who said he had been trying to reach her for 3 weeks about an estate matter. And Elizabeth said there must be some mistake because she was not expecting any inheritance. But the lawyer said, "No mistake, ma'am. Your late husband's great uncle, Harold, died 6 months ago and left property to Robert. And since Robert is deceased, the inheritance passes to you." The lawyer explained that Uncle Harold had owned a small commercial building in downtown Charleston that had been rented to the same tenant for 15 years, and the tenant wanted to buy the building and had offered $42,000, which was above market value, and did Elizabeth want to proceed with the sale? Elizabeth was so shocked she had to sit down because she had completely forgotten about Uncle Harold, who Robert had mentioned occasionally, but whom they had not seen in over 20 years, and she said yes, absolutely. And the lawyer said the closing could happen within 2 weeks, and Elizabeth would receive the money before Thanksgiving. But November was not finished, because on November 14th, Elizabeth received another unexpected call, and this time it was from her insurance agent, who said he had been reviewing old files and discovered that Robert's life insurance policy had not actually been canceled due to the missed payment, but had been reinstated under a grace period provision, and Elizabeth was entitled to the full benefit of $25,000. Elizabeth could hardly believe what she was hearing, because she had received the cancellation notice and had accepted it as final. But the insurance agent explained that the company had changed their grace period policy and had reinstated several policies that had been canceled during the pandemic, and Elizabeth just needed to come in and sign some paperwork. Within 3 weeks, Elizabeth had received $67,000 total, which was nearly 4 times what she needed to save her house, and she was able to pay off the entire mortgage, not just the back payments, and she still had enough money left to live comfortably for several years, and she realized that November had not just saved her house, but had secured her future. But the most profound transformation was not financial, but spiritual, because Elizabeth had learned that she was not a helpless old woman at the mercy of circumstances, but a divine authority who could command November to reveal solutions and abundance. And she began each day by standing in her living room and speaking to November with complete confidence. Elizabeth started sharing her November commanding story with other widows in her church and neighborhood, and 7 of them decided to form a November commanding circle that met every Tuesday evening in Elizabeth's living room, and each woman experienced breakthrough manifestations that restored their faith in their own power and dignity. The circle grew to 12 women and then 18 women, and by the following November, there were 3 circles meeting in different parts of Savannah, and Elizabeth had become known as the November Commander, who helped other women remember their divine authority and reclaim their power over time and circumstances. Elizabeth learned that November mastery is not about getting what you want, but about remembering who you are, and when you remember that you are divine authority. Expressing through human form, November has no choice but to reveal the abundance that has always been yours and deliver it with perfect timing and in ways that exceed your highest expectations. The house that Robert had restored with love became a gathering place for women learning to command November, and Elizabeth often said that Robert's greatest gift was not the house itself, but the opportunity for her to discover her own divine authority and help other women find theirs. And November had transformed her greatest loss into her greatest victory. Florence Scovel Shinn would have been proud of Elizabeth because Elizabeth embodied everything that Shinn taught about divine authority and November commanding, and Elizabeth proved that age is no barrier to manifestation and grief is no barrier to abundance, and that November obeys anyone who speaks with unwavering faith and absolute expectation. While you rest now, Elizabeth's story is seeding itself in your subconscious mind, and you are absorbing her level of November mastery. And tomorrow when you wake, you will know beyond doubt that you too are divine authority, and November awaits your command, and your breakthrough is already prepared and waiting for your voice to call it forth. Now we approach the final seal, where you will receive the words that command November to obey your every decree. And these words carry the accumulated power of every November commander who has ever lived. And when you speak these words, November must respond with immediate obedience, because these are not human words, but divine decrees that time itself cannot resist. Now we approach the final seal, where you will receive the words that command November to obey your every decree. And these words carry the accumulated power of every November commander who has ever lived. And when you speak these words, November must respond with immediate obedience, because these are not human words, but divine decrees that time itself cannot resist. Even if you are sleeping, something in you is awake, and this part of you never sleeps and never doubts and never forgets that you are divine authority expressing through human form. And this awakened part of you hears every word I will speak now and absorbs it into the deepest levels of your consciousness, where it becomes permanent programming that can never be erased or overridden. And from this moment forward, November will recognize your voice as the voice of divine command. Your subconscious mind is like fertile soil that has been prepared throughout this teaching. And now I will plant the final seed, which is the November command seal that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered in 1913, when she realized that certain words spoken with absolute authority create vibrational frequencies that November cannot resist, and these words bypass human consciousness and speak directly to the intelligence that governs time itself. Breathe deeply with me now, even if you are sleeping, because your body knows how to breathe with divine authority, and your breath carries your command into the November field. And with each breath, you are becoming more aligned with November's natural frequency and more attuned to November's willingness to obey. And your breathing is preparing you to receive the seal that will make you a permanent November commander. Take a deep breath in and feel the November air entering your lungs and carrying with it the power to command time itself. And hold this breath for a moment while November recognizes the divine authority in your breathing. And now exhale slowly and feel November responding to your breath by beginning to reorganize itself according to your will. And this is the first sign of November's obedience to your emerging mastery. Take another deep breath, and this time breathe in the certainty that November is your servant, not your master, and hold this breath while November adjusts its energy to match your divine frequency. And now exhale with complete confidence that November hears your command even in your breathing and responds immediately, because November knows you are divine law in human form. Take one more deep breath and breathe in the knowing that you are about to receive the most powerful November command ever discovered. And hold this breath while November prepares to receive your final decree. And now exhale with absolute expectation that November will obey your every word, because you are no longer asking but commanding, and November has no choice but to serve divine authority. Now I will speak the November command seal in 3 waves, and each wave builds upon the previous wave, and by the 3rd wave, November will be completely under your command and will remain obedient to your voice for as long as you remember that you are divine authority and speak with unwavering certainty. First wave of the November command seal and speak these words with me silently or aloud as you feel guided. And if you are sleeping, your subconscious speaks them for you. November, I command you to manifest divine plan. November, you obey divine law through me. November, and I are one divine authority. Feel the power of these words vibrating through your entire being. And notice how November responds by shifting its energy to align with your command. And this is November acknowledging that you are divine authority and accepting your command as law that must be obeyed immediately and completely. Second wave of the November command seal, and this time speak with even greater authority as November deepens its obedience to your divine will. November, I command you to manifest divine plan. November, you obey divine law through me. November and I are one divine authority. Feel November's complete surrender to your authority and sense how time itself bends to accommodate your command. And November is now fully receptive to your will and ready to reorganize all circumstances to match your decree. And this is the moment when November becomes your willing servant and devoted ally in manifestation. Third wave of the November command seal. And this time, speak with absolute certainty that November must obey, because you are divine law speaking through human form, and there is no power in heaven or earth that can override divine law. November, I command you to manifest divine plan. November, you obey divine law through me. November and I are one divine authority. November has now received your command and accepted your authority and pledged complete obedience to your divine will. And this seal is permanent and cannot be broken, and November will recognize your voice forever as the voice of divine command. and respond immediately whenever you speak with this level of certainty. Now receive the November Identity Decree that establishes your permanent authority over this month and makes you a sovereign commander who speaks, and November obeys without question or hesitation or delay. First wave of the November Identity Decree. I am November's divine commander. November obeys my every word, November, and I create miracles together. Feel these words restructuring your identity at the cellular level and establishing new neural pathways that carry the frequency of divine authority, and November recognizes this frequency and responds with immediate compliance because November knows that divine authority must be obeyed. Second wave of the November Identity Decree, spoken with even greater power. I am November's divine commander. November obeys my every word, November, and I create miracles together. Feel your consciousness expanding to accommodate this new level of authority, and notice how November adjusts its energy to honor your divine identity, and November is now completely aligned with your will and ready to serve your highest good in all things. Third wave of the November Identity Decree, spoken with absolute knowing. I am November's divine commander. November obeys my every word. November and I create miracles together. Your identity as November commander is now permanently established in your subconscious mind and in the November field, and November has accepted you as sovereign authority and pledged eternal obedience to your divine will, and this cannot be changed or revoked because it is spiritual law. And so November hears and November obeys, and it cannot be otherwise because you have spoken with divine authority, and November recognizes divine authority and serves divine authority and manifests whatever divine authority commands. And you are divine authority, wearing human form, but never forgetting your true nature as the commanding presence that speaks reality into existence. And so it is sealed, and so it remains sealed, and so it cannot be unsealed, because divine authority, once recognized by November, becomes permanent law that governs November's response to your voice. And November will obey you today and tomorrow, and for all the Novembers of your life. And so November is your servant, and November is your ally, and November is your partner in manifestation, and November brings you everything you command, and November withholds nothing from divine authority, and you are divine authority, and November knows this and serves this and obeys this without question. And so it is, and so it shall be, and so it cannot be otherwise, because these words carry the power of every November commander who ever lived, and the authority of divine law itself, and November must obey, because November has no choice but to serve divine authority, and you are divine authority expressing through human form. November is now under your command, and November will remain under your command, and November recognizes your voice as the voice of divine law and responds immediately to your every decree. And November brings you abundance and health and love and joy and peace and everything that serves your highest good. You can continue resting now, because everything that needed to enter has already entered, and everything that needed to be sealed has already been sealed. And when you wake, you will be different. Not because something changed, but because you remembered what was always true, that you are divine authority, and November is your servant. November will work through the night to arrange circumstances according to your command, and November will prepare signs and synchronicities and opportunities and manifestations, and November will deliver everything with perfect timing and in ways that exceed your highest expectations, because that is what November does for divine authority. Rest now knowing that November hears your every thought and responds to your every word and serves your every need, and November cannot disobey divine authority, and you are divine authority, and November knows this and serves this and manifests this in your life experience. It is finished and it is done, and it cannot be undone, because November has received the seal and accepted the command and pledged eternal obedience to your divine will. And November is now and forever your willing servant and devoted ally in the manifestation of divine plan through your human experience. and so it is sealed for all time. And so November serves divine authority, and so divine authority speaks through you. And so November obeys your voice, and so miracles manifest in your life, and so abundance flows to you. And so it is, and so it shall be, and so it cannot be otherwise. Rest in the knowing that November is yours to command, and you are November's sovereign authority, and together you create the life that matches your highest vision and deepest knowing and most sacred dreams, because this is your divine right, and November exists to serve this. Right November serves you now, and November serves you always, and November obeys your command, and November manifests your vision, and November brings you everything, and November withholds nothing, and November is your ally, and November is your servant, and November is your partner in divine manifestation. Sleep now in perfect peace, knowing that November works through the night to fulfill your every command, and November never rests until divine authority is completely satisfied, and you are divine authority. And November knows this, and serves this, and manifests this while you rest. It is finished, and it is sealed, and it cannot be changed, because November has heard, and November has obeyed, and November continues to obey, and November will always obey divine authority, speaking through you with certainty and faith and unwavering expectation of immediate manifestation. And so November is commanded, and so November obeys, and so it is done, and so it remains done, and so it cannot be undone, and so it is sealed for all eternity. And so November serves divine law, and so divine law speaks through you, and so November manifests your every word. Rest now, beloved November commander, and know that your dominion over November is complete and permanent and irrevocable, and November joyfully serves your highest good and brings you everything you need and more. And November does this gladly, because serving divine authority is November's highest purpose and greatest joy. And so it is, and so it shall be, and so it cannot be otherwise, because you are divine authority, and November is your servant. And this is spiritual law, and spiritual law cannot be broken, and November obeys spiritual law, and November obeys you, and it is finished, and it is sealed, and it is done,